A neighbor makes a call that will expose one of the darkest failures in child protection history. But this call, it came 11 years too late. November 2nd, 2024, Mountain Home, Arkansas. Police Sergeant Tyler Polite responds to a call about cries coming from an upstairs apartment. When he arrives, he can hear a child's voice through the floor, talking to the neighbors below. The child is trapped, locked in a bathroom. He doesn't know how to get out. Sergeant Polite goes upstairs. Two children, ages 10 and 11, answer the door. They act like they have no idea who could be in that bathroom. In the master bedroom, the officer finds a door secured from the outside with a ratchet strap. When he releases it and opens the door, he finds a 15-year-old boy, naked, malnourished, sleeping on a pallet on the floor. The boy tells police he's only allowed out to go to school, that he only gets to eat at school, that his aunt, his legal guardian, locks him in this bathroom every single night. But here's where this story becomes something else entirely. This boy had been reported to Arkansas Child Protective Services 29 times over 11 years. 29 times. Teachers called, medical professionals called, law enforcement officers called, people who are legally required by law to report suspected abuse. They called, and they called, and they called. And every single time the state of Arkansas closed the case as, quote, unsubstantiated, without a full investigation. 3 weeks ago, Arkansas state lawmakers held explosive hearings demanding to know how this happened. The prosecutor is fighting for answers while the Department of Human Services refuses to turn over documents. And just last month, November 2025, new charges dropped, including rape. This is the Arkansas torture case, and I'm going to show you exactly how the system failed at every level, what's happening right now in the courtroom and the State House, and why this case could finally force Arkansas to confront a child protection system that ignored 29 screams for help. But I need to warn you, this case involves severe child abuse and torture. If you need to step away, I understand, but this story needs to be told. Before we talk about the system that failed him, we need to talk about who he is. We're not using his real name. The courts have protected his identity. So for this video, we'll call him Michael. Michael is 15 years old. He has developmental disabilities, described in court documents as low functioning. He's small for his age, vulnerable. Exactly the kind of child who needs adults to protect him. And the person who had legal custody of Michael, who was responsible for his care, Jaclyn Barnett, 42 years old, Michael's paternal aunt. Court records show that Barnett became Michael's legal guardian years ago. She filed annual guardianship reports with the state. She even reported that Michael received $733 per month in Social Security benefits. Government money, meant to help care for a disabled child. Living with Barnett was her fiancé, Daniel Wright, 41 years old. Michael called him his stepfather. Here's what's crucial to understand. This family didn't stay in one place. They started in northwest Arkansas. Then they moved to Mountain Home in January 2024, just 10 months before Michael's rescue. And every time they moved, the pattern followed them. Starting in 2013, reports began coming into the Arkansas Child Abuse Hotline. Report number 1, 2013 closed. Report number 5, 2015 closed. Report number 10, 2017 closed. By report number 15, Michael was still locked in that bathroom. By report number 20, he was still starving. Report number 29 came in 2024, once again marked unsubstantiated. But on November 2nd, 2024, something different happened. A neighbor didn't call the hotline. They called 911. What police found in that apartment would be described by the prosecutor as torture. Let me walk you through what Michael's life looked like. Every night, Michael was locked in the master bathroom, not as punishment for a few hours. Every single night. The door was secured from the outside with a ratchet strap. A heavy-duty tie-down device you would use to secure cargo, impossible for a child to open from inside. Inside that bathroom, Michael slept on a pallet on the floor. No bed, no blankets, no clothes. And here's what makes this even more cruel. He had no access to bathroom facilities while locked in there. Think about what that means for a 15-year-old boy, locked in a room all night. Michael was only allowed out of that bathroom for one reason: school. School records show that since January 2024 alone, Michael attended just 112 days, and school wasn't about education. School was about survival. Because the only time Michael was allowed to eat was at school. When police interviewed Michael after the rescue, he explained his life in simple terms: no bedroom. He slept in the locked bathroom, only let out for school. The only time he could eat was at school. But here's what's so disturbing about this arrangement. There were 2 other children living in that same apartment, ages 10 and 11. Those children were not locked up. They were not starved. They had bedrooms, they had food. They were also told to lie about Michael's existence. When Sergeant Polite first arrived at the apartment, those 2 children acted like they had no idea who was in the bathroom. They were coached, trained to protect the secret. When the officer asked them to demonstrate how the ratchet strap worked, to see if they could have locked Michael in accidentally, like the parents would later claim, the children couldn't do it. They didn't know how to operate it, because they hadn't locked him in. The adults had. This wasn't a one-time incident. This wasn't a parent having a bad day. This was 11 years of systematic torture, 11 years of a disabled child being locked away, hidden from the world, starved, treated as less than human. And during those 11 years, 29 different reports were made to the state of Arkansas, telling them something was very wrong in this home. The neighbors in the apartment complex, they heard things. Noises coming from upstairs. They complained to management. Management notified Barnett and Wright about the complaints. The noises continued. In October 2024, 1 month before the rescue, police were even called about the noise. They contacted Wright by phone. He told them Michael was at work with him. The police never verified that claim, never asked to see Michael face to face. And so the torture continued. Until November 2nd, when a neighbor, hearing cries for help, didn't call the landlord, didn't call the state hotline that had failed 29 times before. They called 911. And that call finally saved Michael's life. But it raises the question that Arkansas lawmakers are now demanding an answer to. What about the 29 calls that came before? This is where this case becomes more than just a story about 2 abusive adults. This becomes a story about a system that was designed to protect children and failed so catastrophically that it enabled torture for over a decade. Let me show you exactly what happened. 2013. The first report comes in to the Arkansas Child Abuse Hotline about Michael and his family. The hotline is operated by the Arkansas State Police Crimes Against Children Division, working in conjunction with the Department of Human Services. That first report? It alleged maltreatment. The investigation was closed, unsubstantiated. Over the next 11 years, 28 more reports would follow. The complaints included maltreatment, inadequate supervision, failure to provide food, failure to provide essential needs, extreme or repeated cruelty, failure to protect. Every type of abuse you can imagine, reported over and over and over again. Now here's what makes this absolutely inexcusable. These weren't just random anonymous tips. These were calls from mandated reporters, teachers, healthcare workers, law enforcement officers, school resource officers. These are professionals who are legally required by Arkansas law to report suspected child abuse. People trained to recognize the signs. People who risk their careers and face criminal penalties if they don't report. They saw something, and they did exactly what they were supposed to do. They reported it. And here's what the Department of Human Services did with those 29 reports. Every single one was closed as unsubstantiated. Not one led to Michael being removed from the home. Not one led to serious intervention. Not one saved him. But wait, it gets worse. Prosecutor David Etheridge would later reveal something that shows just how broken the system really was. The family moved multiple times from northwest Arkansas to Baxter County. Some of the 29 reports came from northwest Arkansas. More came after they moved to Baxter County. And here's the thing, the Department of Human Services had no system in place to connect those reports when a family moved across county lines. So when Barnett and Wright moved to a new location, their history didn't follow them. The pattern wasn't visible. Sources familiar with the case say the family would often move residences shortly after complaints were made, almost like they knew that moving would reset the clock. Prosecutor David Etheridge put it this way, and I'm paraphrasing his testimony. DHS did not do what we believe they should have done to identify when repeated calls were made about the same household. Because of this, the abuse went on for a substantial period of time. Let me put this in perspective. Report 1. A teacher sees signs of abuse, makes the call. Case closed. Report 5. A doctor notices malnutrition, makes the call. Case closed. Report 10. A school resource officer, a trained law enforcement officer, sees something wrong, makes the call. Case closed. Report 15. Michael is still locked in that bathroom every night. Report 20. He's still starving. Report 25. Still no intervention. Report 29, made in 2024, marked unsubstantiated. And during all of this, Michael attended school just 112 days in almost a full year. He was wasting away. He was crying out, literally, the neighbors could hear him. And the system designed to save him kept closing the case. Think about what this means for teachers. You see a child who's clearly malnourished, who misses more school than he attends, who seems afraid, who won't talk about his home life. You make the call, you follow the law, you do everything you're supposed to do, and nothing happens. So you call again. Because you're mandated to. Because you care. And nothing happens. How many times do you call before you lose faith in the system? How many times did teachers call about Michael only to see him come back to school when he came back at all in the same condition or worse? On November 2, 2024, when police finally rescued Michael, they found him exactly as the reports had described over 11 years. Malnourished, small for his age, locked in a bathroom, starving. Everything the mandated reporters had been trying to tell the state was true. But by then, Michael had lost 11 years of his childhood, 11 years that he will never get back. When Arkansas lawmakers found out about this case, about the 29 ignored reports, they were furious. And what happened next would expose just how deep the failures really went. Let me take you through the final days before Michael's rescue, because this timeline shows just how many chances there were to save him, even at the very end. For months, neighbors in the apartment building had been hearing noises from the unit where Michael was held. Cries, sounds of distress. They complained to apartment management. Management contacted Barnett and Wright about the noise complaints. The noises continued. In October 2024, police were called about the noise complaints. They contacted Daniel Wright by telephone. Wright told them Michael was at work with him. The police never asked to see Michael, never verified the claim, never conducted a welfare check. If they had, they would have found a 15-year-old boy locked in a bathroom. But they took Wright's word for it. On November 2nd, a Saturday, the downstairs neighbor heard cries for help again. This time, they didn't call the landlord. They called 911. Sergeant Tyler Polite was dispatched to the apartment complex. When he arrived, he could hear a child's voice talking to the people downstairs. The child said he was trapped in the bathroom, that he couldn't get out. Polite went upstairs to the apartment. Barnett and Wright were both at work. The only people home were two other children, ages 10 and 11. When Polite asked them about the person in the bathroom, they acted confused. They claimed they didn't know who it could be. But under further questioning, they led the officer to the master bedroom. The master bathroom door was closed. Attached to it was a ratchet strap, secured to a bedpost. Polite released the strap and opened the door. Inside, he found Michael, 15 years old, naked, sleeping on a pallet on the floor, no bed, no blankets, no clothing, no dignity. Michael told police his story. He said he didn't have a bedroom, that he slept in the locked bathroom every night. He said he was only let out to go to school. He said the only time he got to eat was at school. When asked about his clothes, Michael explained he had put them in the vent because he was cold. Barnett and Wright were interviewed separately. Both told the same story. They claimed they had no idea Michael was locked in the bathroom. They suggested the children must have been playing, that maybe they'd locked him in accidentally. But remember, when police asked the 10 and 11-year-old to demonstrate how to use the ratchet strap, they couldn't do it. They had no idea how it worked, because they hadn't been the ones locking Michael in. Barnett and Wright then changed their story. They said the ratchet strap wasn't being used to keep Michael in. It was being used to keep all the children out of the bathroom. Why? Because of a leaky faucet that they'd reported multiple times. But when investigators checked with apartment management, there had been only one bathroom maintenance request for a loose toilet in July. No leaky faucet, no multiple reports, just another lie. On November 2, 2024, Jaclyn Barnett and Daniel Wright were arrested. The initial charges: 112 counts of first-degree false imprisonment, 1 count of endangering the welfare of a minor, 1 count of permitting child abuse, 1 count of kidnapping. Why 112 counts of false imprisonment? Because investigators calculated the number of days Michael had been let out of the bathroom to attend school and locked back in when he returned. 112 days of school, 112 times he was imprisoned. But as investigators dug deeper into this case, they discovered something that changed everything. The 29 reports, spanning 11 years, all closed as unsubstantiated. When this information became public, when Arkansas lawmakers learned that the state had received 29 reports about this family and done nothing, that's when all hell broke loose. October 8, 2025, nearly a year after Michael's rescue. The Arkansas State Agencies and Governmental Affairs Committee, both House and Senate, convenes a joint hearing in Little Rock. The subject: how did the Department of Human Services allow a child to be tortured for 11 years despite 29 reports? Prosecutor David Etheridge testifies first. He lays out the facts of the case. 11 years of torture, 29 reports, all ignored. Then he says something that captures what everyone in that room is thinking. How did we allow a child to be harmed when there were reports made? Some 29 reports? There's got to be a better way to filter and identify when these types of complaints come in to ensure this does not happen over and over. Then it's the Department of Human Services' turn to answer questions. DHS Director Tiffany Wright takes questions from lawmakers, and what she reveals is stunning. Representative Ryan Rose, a Republican from Van Buren, asks a direct question. Has anyone at DHS been disciplined for this failure? Has anyone been fired? The answer: no. No disciplinary action, no one fired, no one even formally reprimanded, 29 reports ignored, a child tortured for 11 years, and not a single consequence for the people who were supposed to protect him. But wait, it gets worse. Before this hearing, DHS had promised transparency. DHS Secretary Christy Putnam had met with Prosecutor Etheridge earlier in the year. She acknowledged the failures. She promised a full internal investigation. She said she would share the findings. Then DHS changed its mind. They called the promise of transparency a, quote, mistake. They refused to release the findings of their internal investigation. They refused to provide documents to the prosecutor. They hid behind confidentiality laws, laws designed to protect children, to avoid accountability for failing to protect a child. Prosecutor Etheridge tells the committee he's moving forward with the case against Barnett and Wright regardless. He says if DHS's actions rise to the level of criminal negligence, he'll ask the Arkansas State Police to investigate the agency itself. The committee votes to refer the matter to the Child Maltreatment Investigations Oversight Committee for a deeper investigation. Meanwhile, the Mountain Home Observer, a local newspaper, has been trying to get answers through Arkansas Freedom of Information Act requests. Every request has been denied. The newspaper is now considering legal action to force the state to release documents about how they failed Michael. As lawmakers were still demanding answers, as the public was still processing the scale of the failures, prosecutors dropped a bombshell, new charges, new victims. And this case, it was about to get even worse. November 6, 2025, Jaclyn Barnett and Daniel Wright are arrested again, this time in Mansfield, Arkansas in Sebastian County. They're transported back to Baxter County to face new charges that reveal the abuse went even further than anyone knew. Jaclyn Barnett now faces 41 additional charges, 10 counts of rape of a person under 14 years old, 10 counts of second-degree sexual assault, 10 counts of false imprisonment, 10 counts of sexual indecency with a child, 1 count of endangering the welfare of a minor. Daniel Wright faces 2 additional charges, 1 count of false imprisonment, 1 count of endangering the welfare of a minor. The investigation revealed that while Michael was being held captive and tortured, there was another child in that home being sexually abused. The judge agreed to seal court records about these new charges. Prosecutors argue that releasing details could, quote, compromise the integrity of the investigation. But here's what we know. While Barnett and Wright were out on bond after the first arrest, while they'd lost custody of Michael but still had access to other children in the home, the abuse continued. This time, the court wasn't taking chances. Bonds went from $50,000 each to $1 million each. Both Barnett and Wright are now being held in the Baxter County Detention Center. They remain there as of the recording of this video. Let's add this up. Original charges, 112 counts of false imprisonment each, plus additional charges. New charges, 41 more for Barnett, 2 more for Wright. Total charges between them, 273. The trial that was supposed to begin on November 10, 2025 was canceled. A new trial date has been set, January 12, 2026. That's just weeks away now. The defense is already laying groundwork for their strategy. They're attacking Michael's credibility. Court documents show the defense claiming the victim is, quote, not credible. They're also fighting against prosecutors' request to have Michael testify remotely or with accommodations. The defense argues they have a constitutional right to confront their accuser. They want Michael to testify in the same courtroom, facing the people who tortured him for 11 years. Prosecutors are fighting this. They've filed motions explaining that Michael is terrified, that forcing him to face his abusers could re-traumatize him. The judge will have to decide. Michael is now in foster care. He's receiving support from school district officials, but think about what he's facing. He's going to have to testify, going to have to relive 11 years of torture in front of a courtroom full of strangers, going to have to face the aunt who was supposed to protect him and instead locked him away like he was less than human. The trial is coming. But while Barnett and Wright will face a jury for what they did to Michael, there's another question that still demands an answer. Will the system that failed him 29 times face any accountability at all? This case has exposed catastrophic failures in Arkansas's child protection system, and fixing it requires understanding exactly what went wrong. Failure number 1, no cross-jurisdiction tracking. When a family moves from one Arkansas county to another, their history doesn't automatically follow. DHS can't connect the dots when reports come from different locations. Barnett and Wright moved from northwest Arkansas to Baxter County. Reports were made in both places, but the system treated them as separate cases instead of a clear pattern. Failure number 2, no automated pattern recognition. 29 reports about the same family over 11 years. There should have been red flags everywhere, automated alerts, mandatory escalation. Instead, each report was treated as an isolated incident, closed as unsubstantiated. Next case. Failure number 3, unsubstantiated equals case closed. When DHS marked a case as unsubstantiated, that was the end of it. No required follow-up, no monitoring. But unsubstantiated doesn't mean the abuse isn't happening. It just means they couldn't prove it in that specific investigation. With a vulnerable, disabled child who's coached to lie and 2 other children being used as witnesses, how could any investigation be successful? Failure number 4, zero accountability. Despite 29 ignored reports, despite 11 years of documented failures, despite a child being tortured while caseworkers closed case after case, not one DHS employee has been disciplined. Not one has been fired. Not one has faced any professional consequence. And failure number 5, confidentiality as a shield. DHS is using laws designed to protect children to protect themselves. They're refusing to release their internal investigation, refusing to provide documents to prosecutors, refusing transparency. The very agency that failed to protect Michael is now hiding behind the law to avoid accountability for that failure. So what needs to change? Advocates and lawmakers are demanding a statewide database that tracks families across county lines, automated alerts when multiple reports are filed on the same household, mandatory in-person home visits for all reports from mandated reporters, no more taking a parent's word over the phone, independent oversight of DHS caseworker decisions, reduced caseloads so investigators actually have time to investigate, better training on recognizing abuse in disabled children who are especially vulnerable, and accountability, real consequences for caseworkers who miss obvious patterns or fail to follow up. Prosecutor David Etheridge is demanding transparency. He's prepared to ask the Arkansas State Police to investigate DHS for potential criminal negligence. The Child Maltreatment Investigations Oversight Committee is now reviewing the case. The Arkansas legislature will meet again in 2026. They could pass reforms. But here's the hard truth. We've seen this before. A horrific case exposes system failures. There's outrage, promises to do better, and then nothing really changes. Gabriel Fernandez in California. Hart family in Washington. Case after case where children were reported over and the system failed. Michael's case could be different. The evidence is undeniable. The failures are documented. The public pressure is intense. But whether Arkansas actually fixes what's broken, whether they create a system that protects children instead of enabling abuse, that remains to be seen. What we do know is this. Michael survived. He's in foster care now. He's getting support. He has a chance at a life that was stolen from him for 11 years. And the people who tortured him are facing justice in January. That's something, but it's not enough. Because somewhere in Arkansas right now, there might be another child, another family with multiple reports, another pattern that's not being recognized. And the question is, will the system save that child? Or will we be having this same conversation in another 11 years? Michael's case teaches us something crucial. The people who tried to save him did everything right. Teachers saw the signs and reported. Doctors saw the signs and reported. Law enforcement saw the signs and reported. 29 times people who cared made the call. The system failed them. But they didn't fail Michael. So here are the signs to watch for. The signs that were visible in Michael's case. A child who's frequently absent from school with questionable excuses, unexplained weight loss, or visible malnourishment. A child who seems afraid to go home or talks about being locked in rooms. Adults who isolate a child from peers, family, or normal activities. Families who move frequently, especially after reports or complaints. And remember, disabled children are especially vulnerable. They may not be able to report abuse themselves. They depend on us to see the signs and act. If you see these signs, here's what you do. In Arkansas, call the Child Abuse Hotline, 1-800-482-5964. It's available 24/7. Nationally, you can call 1-800-4A-CHILD. That's 1-800-422-4453. You do not need proof. You don't need to be certain. You just need reasonable concern. And if you're a teacher, healthcare worker, law enforcement officer, or other mandated reporter, you are legally required to report. It's not optional. Here's what Michael's case teaches us about reporting. Don't assume someone else will call. Make the call yourself. If nothing changes, call again. Document what you see. If the state hotline doesn't act, contact local police. Contact the prosecutor. Michael was reported 29 times. The people who made those calls did the right thing. They shouldn't have had to call 29 times for the system to work. But maybe call 30 would have been the one that saved him earlier. We can't give up, because somewhere there's a child who needs us to be their voice. This case isn't over. January 12, 2026, Jaclyn Barnett and Daniel Wright will face a jury for what they did to Michael. Arkansas lawmakers are still demanding answers that DHS may never provide, and a 15-year-old boy is trying to rebuild a life that was stolen from him, one locked bathroom door at a time. 29 reports should have been enough. One should have been enough. But this case proves that reporting isn't enough if the system refuses to act. The fight for Michael isn't just about punishing the people who hurt him. It's about fixing a system that failed him 29 times. It's about making sure the next child who's locked in a bathroom, the next disabled kid who's starving, the next victim who needs help, that their first report leads to action, not their 29th. If you want to follow this case as it goes to trial, if you want to see more investigations into system failures and the fight for justice, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because we're going to be here when the verdict comes down. We're going to follow whether Arkansas actually reforms its system. We're going to keep seeking justice for the voiceless. And if you know a child who needs help, don't wait for someone else to make that call. Be the voice for those who can't speak for themselves. Watch the next videos now showing on your screen or check out our playlists. This is True Crime Buff HQ.